making you all think I'm not too bright. People talk about story arcs a lot, okay? And so I've heard that thrown around a lot by professional writers, story arc, story arc, story arc. So when I started outlining my stories, I would draw an arc on the page. And at the beginning of the arc, I would put the beginning part of the story that I knew. And at the end of the arc, I would put the end that I knew I was going to write. And then I would put a big explodey bit in the middle. And that was the big middle of the story. I write about story middles on my blog. Yeah, I write about big middles in my blog. Or not my blog, but my live journal. If you go to jimbutcher.livejournal.com, it's nothing but articles for aspiring writers that I've written. And yeah, so I would just do that, and then I would draw little marks along the way of plot points that I would have to be sure that I got to. The way I think of outlining your story is kind of like the way you outline a cross-country drive. You got to know where you're going. You got to know where you're beginning. And you probably need to know a few points along the way. Like, you don't just say, I'm going to go get in my car and hope I wind up in Los Angeles today. I'm going to go get my car, and then I'm going to go drive I-70 West. I'm going to take I-70 West until I get to Denver. And then you try and figure out, how am I going to get there? And you need to know, you don't have to know everything that's going to happen between here and Denver. But you need to know that you're on the way there, and you need to be able to see at least a little bit ahead of you. So make sure your headlights are on when it's dark. But there's always a balance between the rigidity of structure and the support it gives you to making a strong story, and creativity, which comes along and tries to collect everything out. Excuse me. But that's one of those things that is a strong enough word because creativity does that to people. And you can suddenly find yourself squirreling off in weird random directions. So it's always a balancing act. If you find the balance right, you'll have a good story. Anyway, yeah.
Have you ever had a story just go completely off the rails? You knew your ending to start with, and then it ended up being something completely different?
No.
Seriously?
Seriously.
I'm impressed.
Yeah, I don't do that noise. Those people work for me. If I need to get them on the right track, sometimes they're going off in the wrong direction. Sometimes I've had to go back into the story and add things in earlier to motivate them to go in the right direction, and then they go in the right direction. But as a writer, you can do that because you're not bound by the laws of time and space. Which is also why you can be much funnier as a writer because you're not bound by the laws of time and space. And when you think of that funny line that you could have said 10 minutes ago that would have made you witty and hilarious, you can just go back and add that in. And then you're witty and hilarious. I don't know about y'all, that happens to me constantly.
I should have said that.
Right. So as a writer, you get to get away with that stuff. Here at the back.
You briefly mentioned some dissatisfaction with your first book. So do you imagine pulling a Terry Pratchett and going back someday and rewriting it?
Going back and rewriting the first book? Oh God, no! I couldn't do that.
No.
Well, in the first place, I did go back and rewrite my first book, and it was just as terrible when I rewrote it. I mean, it was marginally more readable, but it was just as bad. And finally, I scrapped it for parts, and I used some of them in the Codex Alera. But that first story was terrible, so I scrapped it and started putting it in the Codex. But yeah, I couldn't go back and rewrite the first book. I'm a totally different person than the kid I was when I was 25. If I tried to write the same story, it would come out completely different. Or I would just kind of go back in and change a few descriptions and say, this is just the story that I would have advised myself to write at that time while I was rolling my eyes.
You do a lot of NASA. You say area well known for that. To the point in cold days. Thank you. Cold days. I had to sit outside 7-Eleven for half an hour because I kept saying, "Well, we got to get this answered before I go." But anyway, but somehow there are certain things you do that are heart-wrenching. Like when you kill Susan and other things. And that strikes me as one of the hardest things for me to do when I'm writing is write something that makes me want to cry. It's like, I don't want to do that. I'm going to save her instead.
Right.
How do you make yourself go there?
Make myself go.
You want to
When
go
you
there.
started her, did she have a bullseye on her head?
When I started Susan, absolutely, because otherwise she was, yeah, absolutely. Otherwise she was just going to be Lois Lane. And I didn't want to do that. But as far as when you have these heartrending things that you do to your characters, you know, how do you make yourself go there? Well, I don't know. I don't make myself go there. I gleefully chortle. I will literally be sitting at my keyboard doing the Renfield laugh.
No way. You cannot convince me that when Harry reaches out and he can touch a mouse in Ghost Story, you were gleeful.
Yes. Absolutely.
Seriously?
I'm sitting there writing that going, people are going to be torn apart by this. Listen, okay, listen, this is important as writers. Okay, as writers, if you can evoke emotional responses in your reader, you are doing it right. If they are enraged, you're still doing something right. If there are huge arguments among your fan base about what's happening, and people are passionate and in tears and having flame wars with each other, you're doing it right. Writing is about evoking emotions, and if you're doing that, I mean, you know, if you're doing that, then you're getting the job done, and you have to figure out what evokes emotion in you.
Right.
So that you can figure out what's going to evoke emotion in other people. You got to invest yourself in these experiences. You got to invest yourself in these experiences that evoke emotion in you. So when you hear a passage of music that you go, "Oh my God, that's beautiful! It made me feel like this," you stop and go, "Why?" And you think about it. You know, if you put yourself in situations where you will experience these emotions. You know, if you need to write something scary, go out to the country sometime where it's dark and there's not a lot of people around and where there's trees and not a lot of city light, and sit down and wait for it to get dark. Just sit and while the sun sets, because rationally you know nothing's going to happen. Yeah, rationally you know that.
You should try
That's
that.
not what you're talking
Try
about.
that in the middle of Ireland. Oh, dark.
Oh, I believe it.
Nothing.
Oh yeah. The whole British Isles they rate really high on the darkness scale. There's actually a darkness scale. There was a whole special on darkness that I saw on the History Channel. That if you can find it and catch it, you should watch it because it's brilliant. It talks all about the effects of darkness on the human psyche and physiology and all these other things that happens. And it's wonderful material for writing about that stuff. Here at the back.
Yes. I was just curious. I know you've often said that your writing, you really recommend for people who haven't read the Dresden Files before start with either Grave Peril or Summer Nights because that's when you feel your writing got much better.
I recommend they start with Deadbeat.
I was mostly just curious if you yourself can even express what changed in you as a writer that makes everything after those books so much better in your eyes.
I got practice.
Practice,
I mean,
practice,
really, that's all there is
practice.
to it. It's something that you practice. You do it and you practice it. And it gets better and smoother and you get a little bit more capable. And I got older and marginally less stupid. I continue to grow less stupid, which I find encouraging. But I'm working on it. But you know, I think my writing is... Plus, every time you write, you've got to challenge yourself a little bit. You've got to write the book you're not sure you can write. Otherwise, you don't grow.
Okay.
If you just write exactly the same book every time, then you're just. I mean, then you're just. You know, it's not going to be. It's not going to be good for you.
Then you Tom Clancy.
What's that? Be nice to Mr. Clancy. He figured out what the inside of a submarine. He deduced what the inside of a submarine looked like so well that they dragged him into naval intelligence and needed to know where he got his information. I had a similar experience with SWAT in Chicago. Yeah,
Really?
I had a SWAT officer come up after about the scene in the short story The Warrior where the guy takes a prisoner on this roof and he takes out all these lights, so there's only one, there's one approach that he can see perfectly clearly. And the SWAT officer came over and said, "I really need to know who you talk to about that because that's the sort of tactical knowledge that we like to make sure that we sort of have an idea that people have. So whoever it was that gave you this information, we really need to know." And I'm like, I just got on Google Earth and I zoomed in and found out where all the street lights were. And the cop goes, oh. Oh, I hate the internet.
What do you consider makes a cliffhanger really good?
What makes cliffhanger really good? The volume of the screams. That's how I figure it out.
Like in Changes.
Well, yeah, that was not a cliffhanger. I will maintain, technically speaking, from a craftsman standpoint, the end of Changes was not a hit cliffhanger. Harry Dresden sets out to save his daughter, from the Red Court, even if it kills him. And it does. The end.
I literally was like...
And that was the end of the story. But anyway. That was the end of that story, and that was the beginning of the next story, which is the way stories work. I'm sticking with that. But how do you know? You end, and the answer to that is that the best place to put the cliffhanger is on the setback. If you go to jimbutcher.livejournal.com, I've got a whole lecture about how you build a scene and what your goal and your goal, your conflict, and your setback is a part of every scene. And the better your setback is, the more likely you are to end a chapter right there. Okay, we've got 5 minutes, so we've only got time for a couple more questions. Let me go back here to the back.
What about picking up and writing somebody else's character, like Spider-Man?
Picking up and writing somebody else's character, just like anything else. It's just that you've already got your tags and traits established for you because this character has been running around for a while.
Was it easier for you to pick that up and do that, or was it, since it wasn't your character?
Oh no, it was perfectly easy to pick up Spider-Man and do it. I mean, because all of us have written at least mental fan fiction at some point.
I'm right.
Wouldn't it be awesome if Spider-Man had done this? And it's like, oh, I get to write a Spider-Man book. I want the Rhino to have tea on Aunt May's couch. How can I make this happen?
Make him
so
blind.
I set forth to find a way to make that happen, and lo and behold, the Rhino is having tea on Aunt May's couch, and I just loved the whole discussion with the Rhino about how he's convinced that Spider-Man is such a winner and such an alpha over the male achiever, or over the top male achiever, and where the Rhino's like, I'm such a geek and loser, I have to wear a stupid hat, and Spider-Man's like, I feel so bad about this. I know we are in your secret lair, Spider-Man. It's like, yeah, secret lair, we're on Aunt May's couch. Yes.
Dialogue. Sometimes in some pieces that I've read, you can almost feel like you're sitting in the room listening to the characters talk to each other, particularly in science fiction involving military stuff. Any further discussion or thinking about how to get good dialogue?
Good dialogue. Yes, there's a rule for good dialogue where you start learning how to write good dialogue, and that's by writing dialogue of 5 words or less. That's how people talk to each other. I remember telling somebody I was coaching once, 5 words, and they're like, 5 words? 5 words. That's not how people talk. Yes, it is. Like that, and that's how. So, focus on making focus on the 5-word rule, and it sort of gives you a feel. Now, I don't stick to that all the time, but I do it a lot of the time. So depending on where you're going with your story, but a lot of the time that's where you get started. Is 5-word rule, because that's what sounds like actual dialogue. Actual dialogue is not one person in front of the room, shooting his mouth off for an hour. That's when people are sitting having a conversation and talk about other things.
The problem I run into is my protagonists tend to be a little bit too white hat. So how do you highlight the less savory aspects of the character without making him less compelling or likable to your reader?
Basically, I try and have the negative outweigh the positive by about 3 to 1. It seems to be a pretty good ratio. And then depending on how gray you want the character to be, then you, so to speak, that's a joke. You guys don't get it, Garrett does. You change those ratios. Michael doesn't get hardly anything unsavory because he's Captain White Hat. That's who he's supposed to be.
Until warrior.
What's that?
Until warrior.
Well, yeah.
He
Well, sure. Somebody grabbed his kid.
There you go.
But anyway, that's what you have to find the balance that's right for you. Basically, one of the things that you do to make somebody likable is you throw familiar challenges at it. It's, you know, stuff like my car broke down. You know, for Harry, I just kind of, I throw everyday stuff at him. That was in the early books especially. I wanted to trip him up with everyday stuff. You know, I've got my rent due. You know, I've got to fix the car again. I don't really have any money. Can I borrow $5? You know, like that. And those are things that, even if your character is over the top, epic, awesome in some ways, if you can show him being a regular guy other ways, that makes him, that's my Spider-Man rule. That's my Peter Parker rule. The Tao of Peter Parker. You can be awesome over here, because Peter Parker would, you know, after the big fight, you know, the Avengers would be flying away, and other people would be getting in their Quinjet, and other people would be getting into the Fantastimobile, and other people would be super speeding away or whatever, and their costumes with unstable molecules. Spider-Man would be standing there with his costume ripped to shreds, holding his tights up with one hand, with a paper bag over his head because he got his mask blown away. And you know, and somebody and Captain America like, do you need to lift home, Spider-Man? And Spider-Man, like, you know, I've got this thing where I've got like a secret identity that's secret, and so I can't tell you where I live. And Sue Storm would be like, oh, Reed, give him bus fare. And that was Spider-Man, because even though he's doing awesome epic stuff, he still gets tripped up with these human things, and that's what you do with your characters. Even your character's Captain Whitehat, you can still show him being frustrated. You can still show him, you know, running into these things that are the things that you run into. You know, it's not hard. You just kind of, if you ever run into somebody that's a little bit too Clark Kent, you just think more Peter Parker.
Me?
But right, yeah.
I was going to ask you, and you sort of lead into it, how do you keep your exaggerated protagonist from becoming Superman, from being the guy that can do everything? Because it's a very easy trap to fall into. And using Harry, first time he fights the Nickelheads, one of them is trashing him up, down, left, right. By the, you know, a couple books later, he's taking on 27 of them inside a room, and hey, I got him down, I got him down. It's like, wow, we've leveled up a few levels here in the interim. So.
Did you ever read Old Man's War by Scalzi?
Yeah.
Okay, protagonist in Old Man's War basically he joins the army, he gets given a new body that has all these incredible superpowers. He gets handed weapons that are, you know, nanotechnology weapons that he can adjust on the fly as he needs to go to whatever situation he's in. He gets all this incredible stuff, this super armor, this incredible medical technology to help him. And then he gets a lecture that says, bear in mind that you are a soldier. No soldier in the history of humankind has ever gone to war with everything he wanted, just the bare minimum he needed to survive. That's what you have. It's a tough universe, and that's kind of where you get started. And as long as you make sure your character has what he needs to survive this story, not what he wants, just what he needs, you'll be okay.
Go ahead, John.
One of my favorite scenes in the Dresden Files is in Small Favor when he's yelling at God, and just wanted to, and that always makes me cry, by the way. And I just want to know, like, what was like when you were writing that, what was going through your head, like, and it also shows those tags you're talking about, those underlining tags, like, he's definitely humanity and all that.
Probably what was going through my head was, damn, this is due. Something like that. As far as for the actual writing itself, I don't know. You ever been furious about something? You ever yelled at God?
Yes. Totally.
Yeah, probably something like that.
Totally.
I just love
the way
that
I felt
scene.
after my father died, probably. But how are we doing for time?
We're not done right now.
Okay, I'm gonna do one more question. Here at the back of the room. Okay, I didn't hear you. What?
The meeting between the protagonist and the antagonist, and usually the books lead up to them, maybe there's more than one, and at that point you are committed to your protagonist, but sometimes your antagonist is somebody you almost want them to win, in a way. And
That's a good antagonist.
yeah. So, you know, my problem is when I get there, the only way out is usually violence. And I'm trying to find ways for it to be clever, and because the protagonist would not turn to violence. So it's like I would be writing something that is not what my character would do. So
Holy ground, Highlander. Remember what Ramirez taught you. There are all kinds of devices for it, and you see it everywhere. And I really love having confrontations having a confrontation that is not your showdown, because it's great foreplay. And foreplay is important in writing and storytelling. You gotta warm people up to it. But yeah, that's going to be one of those creative things where you got to figure out ways that you can have your protagonist and antagonist together without sacrificing the character integrity of either, and that can be difficult. Occasionally, you might need to build your protagonist. You might need to go back and retool your protagonist or antagonist in a way that gives them a good reason for this to not necessarily be an immediate extinction encounter right now. Nicodemus is 2,000 years old. He's patient. He doesn't have to kill you right now. He knows he's going to beat you. He's better than everybody alive. So if he kills you right now or kills you 5 minutes from now, not a huge difference, as far as he's concerned. If it's not practical to wait that long, then sure, go ahead and cut his throat right away. But, on the other hand, though, he's not really a threat to me because I'm just that awesome. If you have characters who are just, your typical evil overlord villain just loves going up and taunting the hero. Although I think it's much cooler when we do it Joss Whedon style, and the mayor just walks into the library and says, hello! In season 3 of Buffy.
I love Buffy.
Because the library was the sanctum sanctorum. Nobody came in there. That was where the heroes were. That was the safe place. And the mayor just walks in, bold as brass. That was awesome. That was an awesome villain moment.
I gotta watch season 3 now.
But yeah, confrontations are tough. And you got to find a way. You got to find a way to somehow have them without having them right, without finishing the story right there. But yeah, it's difficult to figure that out. But it's part of the challenge, right? So I don't know. Do it yourself.
Thank you.
But look around and find people who do it really well. Yeah, but I just copied me.
Hey there, you could do worse.
Yeah. Okay, guys, thank you very much for coming and listening.
Thank you guys so much. Please stick around. Carolyn Sturgeon's here next at 3:30.
When she was much tinier.
Great talk.